All right, so we looked at some pretty simple examples in our last video, and I did allude to the existence of certain examples that students can have difficulties with at first, and this is one such example. So let's take a look at this. What makes this any different? Well, we start with the term of positive 13x, then it looks like we're subtracting 4, and then we're subtracting this term 5 times the quantity 2x plus 1. Okay, so what makes this different? This subtraction sign makes this really very different, and we got to be careful about how we're dealing with this. So let's just start from the beginning. We know we have a term of 13x, then we're subtracting 4, and then we're subtracting. What are we subtracting? We're subtracting this whole term here. We're subtracting 5 times the quantity 2x plus 1. So we know that we can simplify the quantity of 5 times 2x plus 1, right? We have a factor outside the parentheses. We can distribute it inside the parentheses. So this term we're subtracting, 5 times 2x plus 1, turns into 5 times 2x plus 5 times 1, right? And 5 times 2x is just, let me rewrite all this down here, minus 5 times 2x is just 10x, plus 5 times 1 is just 5, right? All right, so here's where we are so far. So what's really important about doing this? Well, we have to understand what it means to subtract a multi-term expression. We have to know how to do that. So let's think about what this newly written expression is telling us. So we're starting with 13x, we're subtracting 4, and then what are we doing? We're subtracting this whole expression. That means we're subtracting both of these terms. We're subtracting positive 10x, so that turns into minus 10x, and we're subtracting positive 5, so that turns into minus 5. Everyone see that? We're subtracting all of the terms that are inside the parentheses or brackets that come after a subtraction sign. And so now we have our expression written as something we should know how to work with. What kind of terms do we have? We have 2x terms, right? And we have 2 constant terms, right? All right, so what's the deal here? We start with positive 13x, and what's our next x term? Our next x term is subtraction of 10x. So we start with 13x and subtract 10x. We're going to get 3x. And what next? What are our constant terms? We start with negative 4, right? Because the first time we see a constant term, there's a subtraction sign in front of it. So we start with negative 4, and then from that we subtract 5. So negative 4 minus 5 is negative 9. So our constant term is minus 9. So here is the simplified expression of what we started with, 3x minus 9. All right, let's take a look at a couple more examples. All right, so let's take a look at what's going on here. In this case, we're going to have to do 2 instances of distribution, and make sure we note that our first instance of distribution, we're subtracting the term that we're going to use the distributive property on. In our second instance of distribution, we're going to be adding the result of that distribution. All right, so let's go through this one at a time. All right, so let's take a look at what this first term is, and let's always remember that we're subtracting the result of this. So we have a factor of 7 outside the parentheses, and we're going to distribute it onto the terms inside parentheses. So this becomes 7 times 3a plus 7 times 2, right? And that's going to become, and let's keep track of this minus sign here, 7 times 3a, 7 times 3 is 21, so this becomes 21a, plus 7 times 2 is 14, right? And let's just bring down this negative 4a. So we start with negative 4a, then we subtract what's inside the brackets here, and then what do we have? Then we're going to add the result of this distribution. So we take our factor outside the parentheses and distribute it inside the parentheses. So we're going to get 2 times A minus, we're going to keep that, that operation inside the parentheses, and then minus 2 times 4, right? So that becomes plus 2 times A is just 2A, minus 2 times 4 is minus 8, right? All right, so here's where we are now. Let me just get rid of this little arrow here. There we go. Okay, so now let's try to get rid of these brackets so that we just have, you know, a line of just addition and subtraction here. All right, so we're starting with negative 4A, no reason to have to change that. And then what's going on here? We're subtracting the expression inside the brackets. So since there are 2 terms inside the brackets and we're subtracting the whole expression inside the brackets, that means we're subtracting both of these terms. We're subtracting 21A and we're subtracting positive 14. All right, very good. So we've got that taken care of. And then we have a plus sign and then an expression inside brackets, 2A minus 8. So that means we're adding both of the terms inside those parentheses. So that means we're adding 2A, and it means we're adding minus 8, right? Because if we wanted to, we could think of this as, let me just make some room. You see this minus 8 in here? Remember that we can think of that as, if I can get my pen to work, plus negative 8, right? That's what minus 8 means. It means plus negative 8. So if we're adding 2A minus 8, that means we're adding a term of positive 2A, and we're adding a term of negative 8, right? That's what that subtraction meant. And how do you add a negative number? Well, you subtract, right? So this plus negative 8 here is nothing really but minus 8, right? And that's also how we could have thought of this. Plus negative 8. That's how we wrote it originally, right? Minus 2 times 4 is the same thing as minus 8, which is the same thing as plus negative 8. So if we're adding that negative 8 term, that's the same thing as saying we're subtracting the constant term 8. All right, so at this point, we have this written in, you know, the easiest way to start combining terms. There's no more like multiplication or parentheses anywhere. We just have to combine like terms, something we are very adroit at doing, right? Very adroit. Okay, so let's just make some room here to accomplish that feat. And let's also mark off our like terms. We have, let me get rid of that. We have A terms, right? And what other kinds of terms do we have? We have some constant terms also, right? All right, so let's work at combining those. So what are our A terms? You know what, let's just keep track of it like that. Our A terms are, we have an A term of minus 4A, term of minus 21A, and a term of positive 2A, right? So we can combine them by starting with negative 4, right? And start with negative 4A, subtract 21A, and then add positive 2A. What are we going to get? Negative 4 plus 21, negative 4 minus 21 plus 2. That's going to combine to get our simplified A term, negative 23A. All right, and what about our constant terms? We start with negative 14, because the first time we see a constant term, there's a subtraction sign in front of it. So we start with negative 14 constant term, and then we subtract 8. So we can do negative 14 minus 8, we'll get negative 22. So we have a constant term of negative 22, which we can write as minus 22. And here is our simplified expression from what we started with, negative 23a minus 22.